The US government, it actually publishes financial statements every single year, kind of like a big company does. But a recent analysis of those official docs claims they tell this absolutely shocking story, one that almost everybody missed. So, what is it? Let's dive in and find out.
So check this out. This is the headline from the article that got us started on this whole thing. I mean, that is a huge claim, right? The idea that the Treasury's own numbers point to insolvency and nobody noticed? So is this just clickbait, or is there something really there? Well, let's go look at the evidence. All right, to really figure this out, we're not going to mess around. We're going straight to the source. We're talking about the Treasury Department's own financial report for fiscal year 2023. Let's see what the numbers themselves actually tell us. Okay, so here are the big top-line numbers pulled right from that report. On one side, you've got the government's assets, what it owns, coming in at just over $6 trillion. But then you look at what it officially owes, its liabilities, and that number is nearly $48 trillion. Yeah, you don't have to be a CPA to see that's a massive gap. So that gap, that's what's called the net position, and it's sitting at negative $41.72 trillion. But here's the thing, it's not just sitting there. The report says this negative number got worse by over $2 trillion in just 1 year. So in other words, the hole isn't just big, it's getting deeper and fast. Let's boil this down to make it super simple. For every single dollar in assets the government has, it has almost $8 of debt. Now think about that. A ratio like that in any business or even your own household, that would be setting off all kinds of alarm bells.
But this is where the article's whole argument really kicks into high gear. It says, hey, that $48 trillion debt, that's just the tip of the iceberg. The real story, according to this analysis, is in what's not even on that official balance sheet. We're talking about massive promises that are kind of hidden just below the surface.
So where do these, hidden numbers come from? Well, they're from another official report. It's called the Statement of Social Insurance, or SOSI for short. And this is basically where the government has to disclose all the long-term promises it's made for huge programs like Social Security and Medicare, promises that, right now, it doesn't have the money set aside to actually pay for. Okay, so lock this number in your brain for a second. $47.8 trillion. That's the official on-the-books debt. This is the part of the iceberg you can see sticking out of the water. And, it's already massive, right? But the article is saying, hold on, that's not even close to the whole picture. So the big question is, just how big is the rest of that iceberg? What's the full size of all these financial promises lurking under the water? Well, the article digs right into that SOSI report to find the answer. And whoa, here it is, an additional $88.4 trillion. That's in unfunded promises for stuff like Medicare and Social Security. And what's even crazier, the article points out that this number jumped by over $10 trillion in just 1 year. That's just staggering. Yeah, this chart really puts it all into perspective, doesn't it? On the left, you've got that on-the-books debt we started with, and then right next to it, you've got this much, much bigger bar for the off-the-book stuff. It's just like that iceberg analogy. The hidden part is nearly twice as big as the part you can see. So, what happens when you add it all up? You take the on-the-books debt, you add the off-the-books promises, and the article lands on this grand total, $136.2 trillion. According to this analysis of the government's own reports, that is the total financial mountain the U.S. is facing. How big is $136 trillion? It's a number that's almost impossible to wrap your head around. But to put it into some kind of perspective, the source points out that it's roughly 5 times the size of the entire U.S. economy for a whole year. 5 times the GDP. Wow. And if you thought that was it, hold on. The article adds another layer to this. It points out that the government's own watchdog, the GAO, hasn't been able to give the federal books a clean audit for, get this, 29 years in a row. They issue something called a disclaimer of opinion, which is auditor speak for, these books are such a mess we can't even tell you if they're accurate or not. Okay, I know those numbers are they're astronomical. So to make this all feel a bit more real, the source uses this really powerful analogy. It shrinks the entire federal government's finances down to the scale of a typical family's budget. Let's take a look at what that looks like.
Just look at this table. It's pretty eye-opening. If the U.S. government were a household, it'd be making about $52,000 a year, but it's spending over $73,000. So every year it's going another $21,000 into the hole. And yeah, it has about 60,000 in assets, but here is the real kicker. It has over $1.3 million in debt and IOUs. Its net worth is negative 1.3 million.
So the whole point the article is making with this analogy is pretty simple, right? If this was your neighbor's budget, you'd be pretty worried for them. The article argues that by any normal accounting standard, this household is insolvent. It just can't pay back what it owes.
Okay, so after painting this incredibly stark financial picture, the article doesn't just leave you there with the problem. It also points toward a couple of proposed legislative solutions, a potential path forward.
The first one is something called the Fiscal Commission Act. The idea there is to create a bipartisan commission that would basically be forced to look at these hard numbers and come up with real solutions. The second proposal is a call for an Article 5 convention, and the goal of that would be to propose a constitutional amendment for fiscal responsibility, maybe something like a balanced budget requirement.
So, just to be crystal clear, the source article that we've been walking through, it puts these two ideas forward as the most credible ways to tackle the huge financial situation that it's laid out.
And so, after all that, after breaking down trillions and trillions of dollars in both on and off balance sheet obligations, the article really leaves us with one last big thought. All these numbers, they're public. They're right there in the government's own reports. But, knowing the numbers is one thing. The ultimate challenge, the article suggests, is this. Does the political will actually exist to do something about it?